Good morning. My name is Maurice Crespi, Managing Partner of Schindler's Attorneys. Schindler's Attorneys is the co-founder of COBRA, COBRA having been founded by IQ Business and Engaged Business Turnaround. The idea behind COBRA is to create a shared value ecosystem. The idea being that the partners, in excess of 65 partners, assist businesses in creating a shared value environment and assisting businesses in distress in whichever way possible. We do so. There is a pro bono element to it. If your business cannot afford professional services, they're done for free by the COBRA partners. So bear that in mind. You can also go to our website, COBRA, www.cobra.org.za. Send us an email, info@cobra.org.za. We have a great knowledge base. If you are interested in any of the funds, any literature to do with COVID has been verified by the COBRA researchers, so you know that it's the latest and that it's right. It's not fake news. So please make use of that. And what we also do is we set up private Zoom sessions with your team or your employees, should you require that. And we have these daily webinars to provide you with information in relation to the current state of affairs. And today we've got an interesting webinar, very, very interesting, because today we're going to be looking at the facts. We're going to be looking at numbers. We have Andrea Rademeyer, who is going to be sharing facts in relation to COVID with a COVID tracker that she's built. Andrea is much more than a CEO and intellectual researcher. She's an icon for female entrepreneurs on the continent and has gained success and global recognition as a leader in her field for over 25 years. Andrea is currently serving on 2 COVID MAC technical committees led by Prof. Mochatle and Prof. Mata. The Ask Africa COVID-19 tracker is her passion and contribution to our country during the corona trauma. Andrea is registered with SAMRA, SOMAR, PAMRA, and as a research psychologist with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. She's also completed the YPO, WPO President's Program at Harvard Business School, Boston, USA, for 2015, 2016 through to 2018. And Andrea's delivered several international papers, complemented by leadership awards and accolades. So thanks so much, Andrea. We're really spoiled today to have you online. Welcome to our audience, our Facebook audience and the webinar audience. Our Facebook audience, you'll note that there is a link if you want to join, if you want to engage, if you want to ask Andrea any questions, please do join the webinar now. Before I hand over to Andrea, let me introduce the remaining panelists. We have Emma Marseille from IQ Business, Renee Klopper from IQ Business, Tasneem from Schindler's Attorneys, and Gary Barachowitz from Schindler's Attorneys. Thanks so much, Andrea. Over to you.
It's a pleasure, Maurice. Good morning, everybody. Let me just share my screen with you quickly, because I'm going to show you beautiful, beautiful numbers today. So I'm a numbers person, and I just think that numbers show us a reality, and it helps us, particularly in a heterogeneous country which we're living in, to often show sides of our country and of our society that we don't know. So this research really started, or I conceived of it in February, when I watched what was going on with COVID in China, especially, where it seemed like the citizens didn't have a voice. And I thought we need to do this better in South Africa, and let's give them that voice. Let's measure them and let's see what they say and how they experience COVID and the lockdown. So we've started the study. It's been running since 1st of April. The data collection started 1st of April. And we've done 500, 400 interviews per week, sometimes more. And it was literally meant to look at different aspects of COVID, and we report on this weekly. So if you look at the respondent profile, it literally reflects our population from a Stats SA perspective. This is what Stats SA would want to see.
Andrea, I'm going to jump in. It's very, very small. Is there any way that you can start the slideshow or zoom in? Because we can't read it.
Is this better?
A little bit better.
How about this?
Yeah, that's much better. Go for it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maurice. Yeah, that's important because there's lots of detail on it. So what you're going to see on the slide is something. Look at the left. 50% of the respondents are working. Now, this, as I said to you earlier, reflects the South African, the average South African, and that's why this respondent profile looks like this. We've tracked it, as I said, from end of March. And what I'm going to be sharing with you today is 4 components that I think are important for you, but we've literally got all the data sliced per metro, per province. So please connect with me afterwards if you need anything else. So let's start with how our individuals are doing. Now, this slide shows you, if you look at the top, at the emotional distress. Right at the start of COVID, people were quite distressed and they're virtually on that level again. Now, this shouldn't really be like this. One would have wanted people to do better after lockdown of 4 or 5 months. So this is not good. We've also asked people at the beginning of lockdown how they're managing. At the beginning, it was 56%. At the moment, it's 22%. So lockdown has decimated our people. A third of our people go hungry. Now, this is probably the worst statistic in this pack. It just gets to me how people in our country suffer from hunger. Financial distress has improved with lockdown easing. Now, the thing about fear is it's dynamic. And we've tracked this on a weekly basis. And so we can see that the fear of unemployment, which is the red line with the 25% right at the top, the fear of contracting COVID is the highest overall if you look over the lockdown period, but it always changes on a weekly basis. And this week, unemployment has been the biggest fear. And we can understand why. Even at the start of lockdown, the fear of unemployment was higher than the fear of actually contracting COVID. Now, the purpose of the lockdown was to prepare our healthcare services. Now, the citizens are telling us it wasn't done. So the primary purpose of the lockdown has not been achieved. And our citizens are extremely concerned that our healthcare system will not be able to cope or is not coping currently, and then that there are not enough beds. And you will all remember the debates initially. Do we need ventilators? Is it a good thing to go on a ventilator, etc.? Even so, citizens are aware of the need of ventilators, and 44% are extremely concerned that we don't have enough. Now, the big topic this week was corruption in the healthcare system, and this slide just annoys me. If you look at the numbers right at the bottom, it says 68% of citizens believe there's more corruption now than before the pandemic. And this number has been constant since May, which to my mind means if our citizens know of the corruption being so excessive, it should not have been a surprise to both business and politicians. So why now? What's going on? And I think it's because of all these aspects of our society not going well that our fear levels are rising. They should not be rising at this point, but they are. Now, what we did, we used a psychological model to track how people are dealing with trauma. Now, what one does is, you will know of your own life, when trauma hits, initially you go into denial, then you're angry about it, then you start bargaining. Then a phase of sadness follows, and finally you accept the new facts. Now, the concerning bit on this slide is that South Africans are not moving through this trauma fast enough. So at this point, we only have 22% of our citizens in the far right corner who've accepted this COVID reality. That is not good. 35% are in a sense of sadness. The depression is high. The sense of despondency is very high now. And that, I'd like to see more in the acceptance phase. The practical implication of this, however, is that if we have 10% of our citizens in denial and 12% in anger, those are the citizens that do not stick to the rules. Which means if you have an employee or if you have a consumer coming into your shop front or into your business and they're one of these, they might be bringing COVID right into your business. Now, that of course is a huge concern. The 21% who are still bargaining are those that wear a mask today, sanitize their hands today, and tomorrow they don't because they did it today. So this number is not good and probably one of the red lights in this presentation. Now, when the ban on tobacco and alcohol started, there was a huge debate, which you will be aware of, that we're losing our constitutional rights. And we immediately measured it, and 22% of our citizens said they're more concerned about losing their constitutional rights than they are about actually contracting COVID. So that was interesting. One would want to check that again and see how it is now. When we look at the sanitation index, so here what we built is we looked at a couple of behaviors, the mask wearing, the social isolation, and we mapped it across the country to see which of our provinces are finding it easier to deal with these new behaviors and which aren't. Now you can see here that the province of Northern Cape is not doing well at all. They have the minimum sanitation behavior. And on this slide, it looks like the Gauteng residents are doing best. Where Gauteng battles is with the social isolation. We've all seen these videos. It's very hard to isolate if going to a shop, getting your SASSA payment, if any of those, if you need to have a taxi, you're not socially isolated. So that's what Gauteng in particular is struggling with. And if we look at the detail, we can see here that the orange provinces, the provinces marked in orange, are those that battle most with a particular behavior. Now you will see here that the Northern Cape is just not doing well at all. Also interestingly, we saw that it's the higher income groups that are significantly less likely to listen to government. In fact, the most critical regions is Gauteng, followed by the Western Cape. I was quite surprised by this. I expected the Western Cape to be more critical since the local government is DA, but it's not the case. The Gauteng residents are the most critical. So if we look at citizenship, and if I think citizenship, I think of the Romans, I think of the Greeks. But the first principle of this is trust in the president. Now, initially with lockdown, we were so impressed with our president. And the ratings were sky high. One of our questions gave him a 85% rating. Now, this has dropped massively, especially in the last 3 weeks. The first big decline came when Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma came out and contradicted the president. He immediately dropped in his trust ratings because he was seen as not being in control. But his ratings have dipped sharply. So whilst of all the ministers we've measured, we've been tracking 6 per week, President Ramaphosa and Minister Mkhize are doing best. Their ratings are far beyond those of the others. Their ratings have dipped. The minister with the least dip in a rating has been Minister Motshekga, but she started off a very low base. Now, we obviously want to know how our president is comparing to other countries. And many of you do business across the continent. So we measured 8 countries. And this data collection happened in June. We're actually right now in field again to try and follow up what the citizens are saying. And on this chart, you can see that President Ramaphosa has the 3rd best ratings from his own citizens. And Tanzanian and Ugandan presidents are doing better than we are doing. Nigeria is doing worse. We also looked at food parcels because COVID-19 has, if there's one thing it's taught us, was about charity. It was about better alignment and collaboration between business, NGOs, and government. And food parcels are one of the things that went very wrong in South Africa. And on this chart, you can see that Ghana, Tanzania, and Uganda have done better than we have. In fact, one would have wanted South Africa and Nigeria to have done better since they're the richest countries, but they didn't. In fact, Nigeria also gets the worst rating across Africa for educating their citizens. So, you know, I mean, I'm not a fan of borders closing either, but this gives a different perspective as well. Now, we wanted to know, who is it that will best influence citizens to actually change their behavior? And it looks like it's the health experts. I think we've all been wowed when Professor Karim started speaking to us, when we got a sense of COVID was going to be managed differently to HIV/AIDS. And in fact, the citizens are telling us they much prefer hearing from health experts, the World Health Organization, followed by government, which is interesting. We also asked who will not influence you. And here it is, celebrity influences, to my great relief, then followed by traditional healers and leaders. Now, this slide I thought was interesting because it obviously demonstrates an average score across South Africa. This would look different if you looked at rural areas. In fact, last week we checked which medicine our population groups mainly use, and most support, 42% use herbal remedies and even ritual healing, and believe that can deal with COVID. Whereas when things go very wrong, 62% still prefer Western medicine. Now, the traditional healers and the herbal medicines, interestingly, are not a rural issue, but it's especially high amongst Gauteng males between the age of 25 and 34. So I think what this research has told us and shown us repeatedly is that our assumptions are so often wrong. So let's look at employment. Now, the biggest fear repeatedly during COVID has been unemployment. And I don't need to explain this to you. You all know as CEOs what this means and how this has been impacting us. Now, when we compare the employed individuals to the non-employed, it's quite obvious that the employed individuals will manage far better and have lower levels of fear, higher levels of optimism, etc. Now, this slide I thought was wonderful because it says that employees are confident that their places of work have taken all COVID precautions. Now, there are lots of questions around this. In fact, there's also a question which asked citizens, where do you feel safest? It's obviously at home. And then where else do you feel safe? And it was work. Now, I think kudos to the CEOs in our country who have managed to achieve this. Citizens don't feel safe in shops. So that's something to just remember. Now, the youth have suffered from the highest fear levels during this time. So it stands to reason that the youthful employees feel less safe than any other generation to actually return to work. Even so, once employees were able to return to work, they were happy about it, and they themselves reported a sharp increase in productivity. So home office, we all know what its benefits are, but I think there will still need to be a lot of thinking on how best to balance this for employees in different settings. So the UIF story, which we have all struggled with and all know that it didn't do what it was supposed to do. When we compare the macros, it was interesting that Mangaung did well, but the gap between the applicants and those that actually received UIF is too high. So you know, this is obviously not what we would like to see. Now, this slide again tells you that 2 in 3 people have said that the employers are affected by the lockdown. And this, of course, as we all know, is a travesty, and we're all in it at the moment. The worry which employees have in coming to work is those that have to use a taxi don't feel safe. In fact, if you look on the right-hand side of this slide, you will see that only 10% of all taxi commuters feel completely safe in a taxi. And now, of course, we know also that taxis are allowed to fill up, and the mask wearing and the sanitization is not on the level we would want it to be. So this is a concern, because once again, an employee might be sanitizing at home, but then needs to take the taxi to do their shopping or come to work. The numbers seem to say that the part of the sanitation behaviors which citizens struggle most with are linked to the social isolation. A fatigue has set in, and citizens are simply not coping with the isolation anymore. And I think we've all questioned the logic of taxis as opposed to social isolation. So here it comes to the money. Now, the reason I'm sharing this slide is that the numbers of our citizens that are saying they have to borrow money to cope with the lockdown is too high. Only 1/3 of the citizens are not going into debt. And I'm worried about the mindset of debt in South Africa, with our huge debt discussions with government, and with all the data around government spending more than there is, and the lockdown having cost us so much in taxes. The same is happening on a micro level. So this is a concern. We also interviewed employees in a healthcare environment. Now, you now know how this grief funnel in trauma works, and it simply states that we don't, at this stage, 4 months into lockdown, want to see employees in a stage of denial, anger, or bargaining. Now, the area which has achieved this best is actually the healthcare environment. So the nurses and the non-clinical staff are doing brilliantly. A large part is still in the mode of sadness, but sadness is already moving towards acceptance. And that maybe is an indication of the emotional resilience of our healthcare workers. The emotional resilience is very high, excuse me, higher than amongst professional staff. We've also seen that obviously they're also scared of being infected, but yet they feel confident that they will go to work. They are happy to deal with patients. They feel prepared, but they are worried that the South African healthcare system as a whole is not sufficiently prepared. And we've seen this view echoed by citizens as well. So if we look at consumerism, the consumers, the thing we need to recall or remember is that half of the citizens are concerned about the amount of food in their homes. Children are going hungry. So this already tells us that the retailers will have to plan differently. 1/3 of respondents have no means of financial assistance. On another piece of research which I'm busy with now on small and medium enterprises, the consistent answer has been there is no support for small and medium enterprises. So this needs to be rejigged. But the respondents are also, the citizens are, the individuals are also suffering from not having financial assistance. It's generally family and friends who help, whether you're an individual or a small and medium enterprise. Around 40% of the citizens are considering substantially downscaling in the short term already. Now, where will they downscale? The highest numbers were with domestic help. I think it's a bit of a, it was tricky that domestic helpers could not come in. So I think that entire industry has been restructured over lockdown. But then the short-term and long-term insurance will be an item to be cut, as well as even cars and downgrading on children's schools. I was very surprised by this. When we looked at rental payments, it also seemed that citizens were saying they have another 3 months where they can carry their rent and they would have to downgrade. So the impact of this can already be seen in the shopping frequency, and I think we all read the ShopRite and the Woolworths statements of this week, which reflect some of this already. So firstly, the consumers are, the frequency of shopping is reduced. The release by ShopRite was that the size of the shopping basket has increased. That may be so for some of them, 30% of the citizens, others it has reduced, reflecting their financial realities. So if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see that there's a lot of there's a huge dynamic amongst retailers in how the consumers shop. So I think fighting for the consumer segment is absolutely going to drive strategies at the moment. Only a third of shoppers have said they haven't changed the way they shop. If we look at particularly healthy eating habits, at the beginning of lockdown, consumers said they've changed their eating habits. They were not able to order in takeaways, so a lot of home cooking and banana breading started. But this already, so initially the likelihood of going for takeaways was very low, but that's thankfully for the fast food operators dropped by 30% already on level 3. So the whole world of online shopping, of course, is a new one, or is not new, but it's been given a huge boost with lockdown. And I think this is a huge opportunity for us going forward. And I think particularly the delivery mechanisms are a differentiating opportunity. How will you do delivery? Because that's where the excitement of going to a shop actually then turns to receiving your shopping. So I think there's a good opportunity. Now, when we ask business owners, and there's a small sample here, but we asked them how long will it take to recover? Half of them said more than 6 months. And I think that stands to reason. Yeah. So we've also been tracking businesses that have the best spontaneous reputation during lockdown. And we've seen that especially the retailers have done very well. And Vodacom has also popped up. The food retailers have done very well, sorry. Vodacom has also popped up a few times. When we look at education partners, I think they've been incredibly creative and more creative than retailers in providing new platforms. I would have wanted to have seen this in public education as well. So I think we have a huge opportunity for public-private partnerships when it comes to education in our country. It is such a mess at the moment that it's a wonderful opportunity for new thinking and new strategies. I'm also surprised that, especially for the youth, retailers have not started using video call platforms, because it's something which will particularly appeal to the youth as well as the older generations. Now, Zoom has obviously, we're Zooming at the moment, it's being our new partner in crime, hasn't it? So what struck me about this page or this slide was that even 12% said they've attended a funeral using communication platforms such as Zoom. And I know this from anecdotal experience as well. So I think our social interactions and the way we celebrate is fundamentally changing in future. I've gone through this very quickly, and whilst this is a bit of a jaded statement, what does it mean for employees and consumers? And maybe, Maurice, if I can ask you to pop up a question on white-collar crime, which of course one has heard anecdotally has increased massively during lockdown as well. Let's just see what our respondents say about white-collar crime. So here's the question: has white-collar crime affected your company during COVID? If you quickly give us an answer here so we can see what you're thinking. Maurice, will you come in with the actual numbers?
Yes, yeah. I'll
Yes.
when everybody's voted, I'll end the poll.
Okay, maybe just give it a few seconds and then just look what the answer says now, or are still lots of votes coming in?
Yeah, we've got votes coming in. We're on 34, 36. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. There we go.
Okay. I think it's something as business leaders we need to be aware of. It looks like white-collar crime is going to be on the increase. Desperate times. Let's just also look at your second question, Maurice, on employee anxiety. Can you pop that one up? So the question is, how has anxiety around COVID affected the productivity in your company? Let's just see how we're going to deal with this one. And in fact, there's a lot of writing coming up now about anxiety amongst CEOs as well, which I also think is useful to link into, because obviously anxiety, as I've shown in the numbers, affects everybody. And as CEOs, it's incredibly important for us to manage that, because we need to watch our resources. So let's see what this result says, Maurice. Yeah. So a third of us are saying COVID has affected the productivity to a great extent. 64 to some extent. So I think what it's fair to say is that the vast majority of us have seen that anxiety and the emotional well-being or the emotional fallout from lockdown has affected productivity. This is, of course, a business worry. Okay, let's go to the last question, which is, have you designed a post-COVID consumer engagement model? So the point of this is that the consumer, as I showed you, has totally changed. And if we look at consumer responses, we've done some analysis on this after the previous recession. Consumers go into a phase of abandon, but it never lasts because a recession has already taken its toll financially. So let's look at the result which we have here. This is excellent. Oh my God, we're so agile, I love it. So half of CEOs have already designed a post-COVID consumer engagement model, and I'm sure maybe after this presentation today, some more will think about that. So that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much. To the attendees, please ask questions. That's the point of the webinar, so let's engage. I certainly have some questions. I just want to kick off, you know, the glass has been half empty over the past 4 months, and we've only heard bad news. But I had a thought, and I'd like you to comment on it, using your psychologist, putting your psychologist hat on. There's going to come a time where there's only going to be good news for an extended period of time. Because what's going to happen is we're going to hit rock bottom, and the vaccination is going to come out, the economy is going to recover, employment's going to go up. And I'd imagine that the good news will be for an extended period of time, several years. The Great Depression took several years of good news to get out of it. Now, have you applied your mind to the psychological impact of the good news? Will it counterbalance the negative effects that we're currently experiencing?
So It always does, but it takes longer. What we've looked at particularly is how has the sense of agency improved? Because what one really wants to have after or during a recession is a personal sense of responsibility and accountability. As long as citizens feel that government is in charge, the employer is in charge, someone else is in charge, and I am not, that generally extends the depression, extends the time where we are not ready to actually go into renewal. Now, the good news that, I'm so glad you raised this, Maurice, because that is in fact one of the best parts of this research. The personal sense of agency amongst South African citizens is a staggering 84%, which means that our citizens are already saying, I'm responsible. I'm going to have to get myself out of this. I'm going to have to find a new way of living. And I'm particularly pleased about that because it sets a good trajectory for getting out of the depression which we're in at the moment. One would want I think practically one would want more support between more enabling of small and medium enterprise, more business support in order for employment to go up. I'm just looking at the questions here.
Yeah, I see there's one from Tanya. In terms of the questions on anxiety and company productivity, did you only focus on the negative impact or company productivity has actually improved?
That is very interesting, and I think it's hard on companies to create an absolute, just even out of this poll which we did now. In our company, we have never seen a bigger boost of innovation than in the last 4 months. So I think it's maybe different for professional services companies compared to others. But we've certainly seen that we've now had the courage to just say, let's just do it. And it's been an exceedingly innovative time. So I'm sure it's going to be different in different companies. I hope that answers your question.
There's a question here in relation to stopping corruption and how can the business sector assist. I want to couple that question with something that I have, and that's in relation to behavioral economics. And there's now quite a bit of literature on the role of nudging when it comes to compliance and governments using nudging and the permanent effect that'll have on behavior, such as the washing of hands for 20 seconds. So if you can deal with nudging and what your research has shown when it comes to compliance, when it comes to the COVID crisis, but also I'd imagine that nudging would also be a potential solution when it comes to the question of corruption.
I'm a big fan of behavioral economics, and I think maybe we need to start a working group around nudging when it comes to corruption. I think you're totally right. I hadn't actually thought of nudging in the corruption field yet, but nudging works, behavioral economics work. I know the Solidarity Fund is doing fantastic work using nudging on the sanitation behaviors. So yes, I think we should take it up.
I was discussing with my wife this morning as to, that things have changed for the better in so many areas. As far as I'm concerned, being able to work from home without a stigma, without, feeling obliged to go to the office is huge. But, who is going to change that in your mind? I'm sitting here thinking the world's changed. There's been a paradigm shift. Take the courts as an example. We're now litigating from home. We're in court. Now, the courts in South Africa are terrible. They're disgusting. Now, who is going to, in your mind, what leader, who is going to now try and get the paradigm back to where it was? Because I'm thinking that this is potentially permanent, that these shifts are permanent because everybody's actually quite comfortable and is quite happy with the new state of affairs. Do you have any views on that?
Maurice, I think we're not going back to anything we knew. It's definitely not going to be business as usual. And because, as you say, a lot of us conceptual workers like working from home. What I've seen, I mean, you mentioned courts. And for some types of work, especially when you need to collaborate on something, you need to be physically together and you need to brainstorm something physically. But I think the offices are going to be maybe a third of what they were before. So I'm definitely thinking that the whole working arrangement for professional services has changed. Even for medical services, I think there's a lot more going on now, from medicating from home with online doctors. Michael Moore has done so much in this arena, but there are lots more. So, and if you think of the entire retail market moving home with online deliveries, I think our future looks entirely differently. More warehousing, less experiential shopping places, and more, I think there will be a boost in other experiences, which are not linked to functional things like shopping. So, and when it comes to business, it's changed already, and I don't see it ever going back. I'm also very curious about how local government will embrace this, because I believe that even government will have to change the way they service, the way they engage, the way they are available or not.
I want to move away from business and ask you around schooling and what's going to happen there. And I'm going to put a proposition to you. I presently hold the view that I'm going to be taking my child I'm going to have an 8-year-old out of Crawford School, because they're trying an augmenting approach. It's just simply not working, and moving to a Curo model. Now, the benefit of the Curo model is you can school anywhere in the world. We can go to Cape Town for several months, and there's that benefit. And we know that children learn via traveling. So if you go to a game farm for several months, they'll learn through that process. But what they will not be getting is the social interaction. Now, I put it to you as a good lawyer that the pros outweigh the cons. And I want you to consider what happens, let's say, in farming communities where there's very, very limited social engagement. It's been happening for years. So why, in your mind, should we go back to the old schooling system?
Maurice, you shouldn't. You're talking to a rebel. I always got warnings for my children not being enough days in school. So I'm totally with you. Our children have suffered because of the social contact. And I'm totally for the schooling model being redone. That's what I referred to earlier. There's such an opportunity for greater family time, less schooling. I don't mean to say less education. I think our education can pivot us into a new future when it's done differently. But imagine an online system, let's say Crawford, for example, or Curo, made their system available for the entire country. You know, why not? Why aren't we thinking of that? If the content is there, if the only missing link is training teachers, we can do this. So I'm enormously excited. I don't think we're going to close the school year. In fact, our stats also say, I think it was 62% of citizens think this school year should be cancelled, which is a bit of an odd thought. But yeah, I think there's an opportunity for an entirely new way of thinking about education and schooling.
And do you believe that it's going to be that the pros, such as traveling, I think that's a massive pro, that you can live in various cities and give your kids additional experiences that they wouldn't have. And you mentioned family time. I'm now sitting and having lunch with my 8-year-old every day. I never had that. So I think we agree
What we need to remember is that we have such different socioeconomic levels in the country. So we can live in different cities, but millions can't. And I think, but that's what makes me excited, because I think rethinking, and I remember speaking to the founder of Wikipedia a couple of years ago, who said he tried to roll out Wikipedia for free in South African schools. And I think Vodacom and Microsoft had also joined the party, but they couldn't get it through government in the Zuma years. Hey, let's do this now, you know? So yes, I see there's another question here. There was some collaboration. Is there going to be an increase in community spirit with businesses and communities helping each other? There's already been a huge increase. I think I read the other day, the meals delivered by YPO, which is an organization I belong to, have been millions. So it's definitely rebalanced or given us all a systemic view of how we live and how we earn our income. So I would want to see, coming out of COVID, a new balance of collaboration between government and business and NGOs. I think it could be a fantastic opportunity for everybody to start working together again, because I think everybody's trying to be, or has tried to keep the control for themselves. And if we can give up control, we can actually build a better future, I think, a more sustainable future for our country.
We have another question. Andrea, I love your perspective on a move away from experiential shopping experiences. Before COVID-19, there was a deliberate move to more experiential, deeply immersive experience for customers. It's like there could be a complete flip in some strategies to accommodate the new consumer behaviors out there. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I think what I see happening is linked to our previous discussion, Maurice, where I think the role of family will be bigger and the need for experience is bigger. So we all noticed how much we miss our social interaction. We've all suddenly discovered our neighbors, and we love our neighbors, we've discovered. So I think there's, on the one hand, a need for closer relationships where we live, as opposed to far away. And I think this will lead to experiences like walking together, cycling together, buying together, having the fence discussions with our neighbors if you don't stay 5 kilometers away. So I think the social capital has actually improved during lockdown. And I think that, I mean, even commercially, so many of us, and I wondered if that's not what ShopRite was picking up, whilst we were all, or some of us, so my shopping basket increased exponentially because I was shopping for 4 others as well, elderly people who I didn't want to go out. So I think the way we shop, the way we live is totally new now. And long may it last, but we're going to have to make it last. We can't expect retailers or government or, let us make it last. And us as CEOs, let's drive social capital in our businesses and in our societies.
I have a question for you, and I think it's quite important for the attendees. And that is that there's been a lot of talk that employees will be suffering from PTSD as a result of the crisis. Now, I've got 2 questions. And one for the attendees, the CEOs, the managers, the bosses. How does one pick up that an employee is suffering from PTSD? And secondly, if an employee is suffering from PTSD, what should you do? What's the best advice for a manager or a boss?
So, Maurice, obviously being a researcher myself, I will tell you, you need to measure this. So we did a monthly employee measurement, which we started right at the beginning of COVID, where we tracked our employees' emotional well-being, and then other aspects like, do you want to come to work? How productive are you? How's your collaboration going? And how are you personally? So we picked up that those employees who had issues at home were super stressed in lockdown. I mean, imagine you hate your wife and now you've got to be with her 24/7. You actually don't know your children. They irritate the living daylights out of you, and now you're with them for months. So we noticed that employees who had issues at home were extremely stressed with lockdown. So we measured it, to answer your question, and you can talk to us about measuring it. It's much harder to pick up the normal clues because you don't see your employees. If you do, you need to, I think chances are slim that leaders can really pick it up, you know, on a face-to-face level, because anybody in a post-traumatic stress disorder, unless you're far off the charts already and you show symptoms, you're going to hide your symptoms. So it's not something which, as a CEO, we should expect to see when, on the odd occasion, we meet people. I would measure this.
Yeah, I think it's also important. I believe that for the attendees, it's difficult for attendees to pick up that they're suffering from, or employees from PTSD, because you're not sure what's happening, and a general malaise can be a symptom of PTSD. Yeah. I just want to go back to what two figures, numbers. Can you tell me if there's a correlation between employees being stressed and the anxiety levels at home? So how many, the percentage that said that they were stressed, and can we compare that to the percentage of employees who said they prefer working at work? Is there a correlation there? Is it pretty
perfect correlation? Yeah, I just don't have the number with me at the moment, but this is something we measured, and there's a perfect correlation. And again, there needs to be flexibility. So those with issues at home would say, for example, yes, I want to come back to the office and work there fully 5 days a week. Or they would say, can I work at the office 3 days a week? So we need to have a lot more flexibility on working arrangements. But there's a strong correlation, Maurice.
But then surely that means that the working environment, the office, and we've got to look at it from this perspective, is actually an escape. It's not actually a working environment. And if it's an escape, it's a form of therapy, and the far better forms of therapy. So whilst there may be merits in keeping an office environment for social reasons, surely the alternatives. I mean, I haven't thought about it. I haven't gone through it, but offices ought not be there simply to give employees a reprieve from their family lives. I mean, there are other better alternatives.
Look, it's not just that. I mean, I think you're very funny by saying that. It's not just that. And I mean, our company is very liberal, so we always have therapists and coaches on tap, you know. We have a high learning environment, so anybody can go for any support they need. But just like children have their friendships at school, colleagues also have good relationships at work. And as we all know, an individual, brilliant, highly capacitated person still needs to be in a functional team. In fact, I think this is maybe sometimes a situation in government where there are brilliant individuals, but the teaming and the leadership is dysfunctional.
Yeah, but from a psychological level, then, why does Zoom not tick the box? I'm still socializing with you. I feel that you're here. I'm safe from COVID. So from a psychological level, why is there what is the difference? Why do I have to see you in 3D to get that interaction as opposed to 2D? Because for me personally, it's ticking the box.
Well, maybe you're an introvert, Maurice.
Do I come across as one?
You do, because introverts are often great speakers.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks for that. I see we've only got 5 minutes. There's a question over here, and then I have another general question for you. Are you reaching out into the informal sector? Are the numbers? I think some of the stats I saw, you would have been reaching out to the informal sector, but maybe you can provide us with some more detail there.
What do you mean by informal sector?
Basically, the spaza shops, the hawkers.
Yeah, so about, I think we said 50% of our sample does not have formal employment. So we would have covered some of that. but we haven't categorized it as informal sector. So we do have a component on small and medium enterprise. I'm just trying to think whether we've got something on SPASA, but we don't. What we do have is measurements around Stockfells and Mashonisas and how they've been doing. And in fact, we saw a peak in Stockfell claims during lockdown, especially in Gauteng and KZN. And interestingly, only 69% of those that had applied for a Stockfell payout actually received it. So that's all I can tell you actually at this stage on the informal sector.
We have another great question here from Jandri. What is the state of employee burnout and how to address this? And again, how does one pick up whether an employee is suffering from burnout?
Well, if I just look at myself, if I get a sense of I just can't think anymore, that's my indication of, you know, I just need to get outside and take a break. So you can look at the performance. I mean, you will know your team's performance, and if it's starting to just chug along, you know they need to take a break. But if you're not that way inclined, and many leaders don't intuitively pick it up, I would really recommend that you do a measurement. So oftentimes it's a matter of culture as well. So managing your employee culture, I think that whole arena of your human capital is going to be reimagined entirely now and for post-COVID. But I think this burnout is a huge thing. And if we look at, what was that number? I think, well, we have very high despondency ratings amongst our citizens. Obviously, those are as true for employees, even though employees do better than those without a job.
Andrea, I have one final question for you. I said I'd give you a bit of a grilling. I want to talk to cognitive biases. And what I've found is that we do not have, when it comes to COVID, any evolutionary rationality. And what I mean by that is over millennia, we've evolved to fear bees, but we haven't evolved to fear the germ. Why? Because germ theory is only 150 years old. And at work, for instance, what I look out for is a confirmation bias when it comes to my employees. Because what they do is they come and they say, no, they can come to work. And they don't fear COVID and they come to work. So I say to myself, there's no evolutionary rationality that comes into play. So we've got to guard against that. And then you take biases such as confirmation bias, where they say, I'll wear a mask, it's okay for this reason and that reason. And they ignore the bad news. Do you have anything to say around that?
You know, Maurice, I read an article about a week ago on the role of disgust, the feeling of disgust in evolution and in social evolution as a response to illness. And what we would call this in our current dialogue is stigma. Now, so the form disgust is taken as stigma. So if we know somebody suffering from COVID, there would be a stigma to it. So we've started measuring this, and the thing about our current society is that we are telling people not to stigmatize somebody who's ill. And this was particularly prevalent with HIV/AIDS. And I mean, I'm in full support of it. I don't think any sufferer from either HIV/AIDS or COVID should be stigmatized. Not at all. And maybe just a number on that, 30% of our citizens say they would absolutely avoid people if they knew they had COVID. And that's why so many COVID sufferers rather don't say anything about it. But what you're saying is true. COVID is new, and the social responses are unclear. Let me just.
I'd be so bold as to say irrational on many levels. People are going out.
I think our strategy has been irrational. I fully agree with you.
No, but I'm saying also from an evolutionary rationality point of view, you'll find that people will not drive London Road in Sandton because they feel that it's dangerous, but they will go to a shopping center when statistically it's more dangerous to go to the shopping center. And that's because we do not have that basic instinct that's evolved in relation to COVID. But thanks so much, Andrea. This has been an absolutely fantastic webinar. We've really been spoiled by having you. We are going to get you back. So thanks so much. And thanks to the attendees and the remaining panelists. Please join us tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We have Sofiso, who's going to be giving us his economic wrap-up. Sofiso from the IQ Business Group. He's a superb and insightful economist. So please join us then. And Andrea, thanks again. We'll see you back soon.
Thank you and COBRA, Maurice. Have a good day.
Go well. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.